Right, so our June 2018 webinar, how to avoid falling victim to email phishing scams. Housekeeping, if you got questions, type them in. I'll do that. I'll get them. And again, I'm flying solo today. So again, thanks Rick for being my co-pilot. I'll post recording of the webinar later on. You'll get emails so you can kind of share this out. If you have topics you want to see, please let me know. This next one that we're doing actually came from one of our participants, an idea that they wanted to see on a webinar. It's all about sales. So we're going to have Will Barfield come in from Barfield Revenue Consulting and share some tips and tricks around keeping prospects and clients coming back to your doorstep. So for more information on our webinar, please check out technologyassociates.net/webinars. All of our past recordings and our future announcements are going to be there. So topics we're going to cover. Current stats, four most common tactics that hackers use, why phishing attacks work, which is important because I think if you can understand this, it'll help probably the best case scenario for helping you avoid falling victim to this. We'll take a look at most successful email templates based on click rate, and we'll also take a look at the ones that are seen most out in the wild. We'll talk about how to spot phishing emails. We'll spend most of our time there. We'll focus also on business email compromises, or BECs, which are called spear phishing. And then we'll go over some prevention tips and what you should do if you do fall victim. So current stats, here they are. They're stunning, but they're all very recent. One thing I do want to point out is BEC is business email compromise. That's sometimes referred to as whaling. So that's basically impersonating a CEO or other high-placed person in a company. It's also referred to as a man in the email attack. And it's where you've got somebody you're actually corresponding with. And I've got an example of that, something that happened to us a little while ago. So that's different than just an email blast going out to random email addresses. So the biggest thing to take away here is even if fully patched systems and with the best firewalls and the best anti-spam, 91% of the cyber attacks that we see start with a phishing email, and it starts with a user clicking on a link or going to a site or opening a document that starts the whole thing. So that's why this topic is just super important. So yeah, 76% of the companies claim they experienced phishing attacks. And my thought on all these stats, especially when you talk about the $5 billion in losses resulting from BEC scams, that's over a 3-year period. It's more likely that there was a lot more that weren't reported than probably were, because obviously this is an embarrassing thing and people aren't anxious to share that they've fallen victim to this type of thing. I don't know if any of you follow Vern Harnish with the Rockefeller Habits, an awesome author, also his book Scaling Up. Well, he fell victim to this exact type of scam while he was on stage giving a presentation and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in a real estate transaction. So I'll kind of cover that as we kind of get this a little further down in here. And then also from Datto at the very bottom, 75 billion in losses resulting from ransomware. So this is when someone's doing a cyber attack, somebody clicks on a link, they encrypt all your files, and you have to pay to get them unencrypted. 75 billion, which is, and I believe that stat was from last year, 2017. So really some astounding statistics there. So the 4 most common tactics hackers use. Let's get through these. Number 1, corporate emails. Typically, these are from your company or your employer and look very official. And it's things like mailbox full notifications or a fake spam quarantine or something around HR documents. Got some examples here. Here's one that came in just last week where it's claiming that there's an income review that's not going to be implemented when it was due. Obviously, this is a plain out spam, but it does look fairly official. And if you weren't really paying attention to what you're doing, you might be lured into clicking on this link. And then the second one here, yeah. So, and this is something we see a lot of, and it actually turned up in one of the top clicked links, which is a fake voicemail message. So a lot of us have text or voicemail to email, and sometimes you're not paying attention, or you think maybe systems have changed or whatnot, and you click on a link to listen to a voicemail, and all of a sudden you're redirected to a site that contains some type of compromise. So past that, cloud emails, and obviously we've seen a lot more of this take place as people continue to use more and more cloud services. So it's typically business-related emails referencing some well-known cloud service, like a Dropbox download or resetting your password. So Dropbox seems to take the brunt of this for some reason, and I'm sure it's just because it has become so ubiquitous that people send these things back and forth that people click on them without even really paying attention to what they're clicking on. So here's one to download a file from Dropbox. Here's one to verify your email from Dropbox. Both of these are fakes, even though they look very, very official. Citrix ShareFile, right here in Raleigh. They as they continue to become more and more popular, they're seeing more and more of these type of spam emails go around. Even things like Microsoft Azure, and this is kind of an odd one. You know, we've noticed that your VM has been idle for 5 consecutive days, and there'd be many admins that would click right on that and go, what the heck's going on here, right? So, you know, this is one of those things, and I'll explain later on kind of why some of this works that may help defray some of this. And then the Microsoft verification alert, where you're trying to get someone to, you know, something's wrong with your email, click here to avoid issues, that type of thing. So commercial emails. This is the third type of emails that are sent out, and these are business emails from well-known businesses, typically shipping confirmations. And I think really the earliest one I remember of any of this type of thing coming around is the ever-present UPS shipping confirmation, which still to this day is on the top 10 list of things that people open and get infected with. Wire transfers, password resets. We see things around IT projects, the voicemail scam, and some of these kind of flop back and forth over. So DHL, this is a fake one here. FedEx, they get hit a lot. LinkedIn, TD Commercial Banking, where they're trying to get you to unlock or view documents, and the UPS one, which is an oldie but goodie, but still seems to work pretty darn well for the hackers that are out there. Lastly, are consumer emails. So these are emails that the general public would typically get, Amazon, Netflix, things like that, and they're always account resets or verifications. Really where this comes in is most people tend to use their work email addresses across from both their business and their personal use. So a lot of these folks are signing up for these services using their business email, so it's walking right in the front door to the corporations. So some examples, Amazon looks very, very official, right? This is indeed a spoof. eBay is one. Yeah, hey, we need to click here to get your change your password. Netflix, this is a great example of one where they're trying to make you think that somehow that you've closed your Netflix account, which I'm sure would send most people into a panic. Updating your payment method, again, something, if you were a member of Netflix, it would be very seductive to click on this and go ahead and fix this issue that you thought was going on. And then the IRS, and we see a lot of this go out on and around kind of that tax time at the first of the year. And behind this, and I didn't find an example of it, but it's very common, is kind of a blend between the IRS thing and HR and business email compromises. And we see a lot of this where an HR person at a business will get a request, possibly from the president, possibly from someone else in HR, requesting copies of all the W-2s from the prior year to complete the tax submissions. And it's amazing how many people will just package those up and send them off. And Hilton Honors, an important message, same exact thing. This is 100% fake here. So why do phishing attacks work? You would think that most people would be suspicious about it at this time, but also understand that the hackers are getting more and more sophisticated. They can see what works. They can see what gets click-throughs. They're, I'm sure, tracking their subject lines, their graphics, what works and what doesn't work. So it's almost like they're improving their marketing approach. They'll typically prey on a couple of different things. One, a sense of urgency. I think you saw a couple of examples like that where, hey, this is an important announcement, or this is urgent, or your account is expiring. These type of things that make people want to immediately jump into fixing the issue into a corrective mode without thinking about what they're doing. They'll prey on a sense of fear, where it's like breach or um, security incident, things like this. Dropbox downloads, resetting your password, those type of things that will make people respond instantly that there is a problem and they need to respond to it. And then prey on victim sense of familiarity. So spoofing well-known real email alerts like LinkedIn, Dropbox, Amazon, Office 365. They'll typically use email addresses from people that it seems more familiar, like administrator or admin or HR or help desk. And then spoofing actual individuals in the case of a BEC or spear phishing, where, and we'll get into a little more detail on this, but the email looks like it's coming from someone, a coworker or someone that you know. So the most successful email phishing templates, and we got this from a study that a company called KnowBe4 did, and this was back as recently as Q1 of 2018. So to tell you a little bit about what KnowBe4 is they offer training kind of related to what we're doing today, but they also will periodically spoof a company or try to get users to click on links. And so this data is coming from what their fake phishing emails, what most was clicked on. So we see again the UPS delivery attempt was made, got a 21% click rate. And this is not general population stuff. This is people who have been through anti-phishing training. The change of password, again, using the word immediately. People see that and they get triggered to click on that link and go ahead and go through the steps to get that issue resolved. The W2 thing that we talked about, which has a 13% click-through rate, and that can come a couple of different ways. We've seen them where someone is requesting the W2s and some internal person actually sends the data, and we've also seen it come through where an end user gets some type of email related to a W2, like we've posted your W2 here, click here to download it. Or there's a problem with your W2, click here to confirm this data. Company policy update for fraternization, which gave me a chuckle. So 10% open rate on that. So clearly people are very concerned about their company's fraternization policies. The UPS label delivery, which we showed an example of that, revised vacation and time, staff reviews, which was kind of synonymous to the example I showed you that I received a couple of weeks ago. Press releases, again, preying on people's fear, deactivation of email. People don't want to be without their email, so they're going to respond to this and click on it pretty good. So, but aside from what people click on, what do people see the most? Okay, so as part of anti-spam and anti-spoofing, we're looking at this data as well and see what actually goes through, irregardless of the click-through rate. And so you see a lot of these type of things where it's coming from IT desk or admin or administrator in these subject lines. So security alert, campus emergency, security concern on campus earlier. So the two things that we talked about on what they prey on or why this stuff works is sending from a familiar address and something around preying on fear and urgency. The Amazon billing address mismatch, very, very common email that goes out. And then you couple that with the well-known company like Amazon, and that's always a winner. Let's see, Wells Fargo, new device detected. Now, if you got an email from your bank that said that they detected a new device that was logging into your account, what would you do? Well, you'd click on it right away and you'd want to take a look at it. And again, these people are preying on your urgency to get some of these, to take care of these things right away. The Microsoft updates of our term, we see that a lot. We probably see the Microsoft update more, and maybe it's just a matter of what we do for a living than the rest of these that are up there. And this new one that I saw was this Gas Buddy. People obviously are subscribing to that, and if you're already a subscriber and you got something from them, then they're kind of preying on the fact that that is a very well-known name there. So how to spot phishing emails. So here are the things that you need to look at. First and foremost, remembering what they're preying on, and that's that urgency. So just take a second when you get an email, take a look at a couple of these things. And I've listed these in order of importance or how we would suggest you do through it. Number one, message will typically contain a mismatched URL. And what I mean by this is the email will come from Amazon.com, but the link may even say Amazon.com, but it goes somewhere else. So that is a dead giveaway. Now, there is a note to this, and that's that some email filters purposely obfuscate the end URL, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here's an example. Dear client, your storage space is almost full. Again, trying to get some urgency there. If you look at the link, it says microsoftonline.com, which is bogus. You should know that, but regardless, even if you don't, if you hover over that link, you can see that it's actually going somewhere else. It's going K9 headquarters, police K9, whatever, right? So in a case like this, the hacker has cracked this website, the K9 headquarters, police K9. They've put a piece of code there that they want to direct people to click to. Then they formulate this email, send it out, and the text is different from the end URL. So that's always the very first thing you should check. Before you click on it, just hover. It'll tell you, and that's a quick way for you to see if this is obvious spam. Now, the note that I told about the email filters purposely obfuscating the end URL, and we'll get into this when we talk about some of the tools that you may want to take a look into. This is what I'm talking about. So you see this, and this is a technology that we use, and probably the majority of our customers use, is that URL defense for Proofpoint. So the emails go in there first, and they're stripping out the URL, and they're putting their own URL there. And the reason they do that is if you click on this link, it's actually going to go to urldefense.proofpoint.com. It's going to shove this URL in, and it's going to figure out what the actual URL was in the email and double check that it's not a known hacked website. So they're actually intercepting your click and trying to double check that you're not getting yourself in trouble. Alrighty. Continued. URLs have a misleading domain name. We don't see this as much anymore, but we used to see it quite a bit. So if you're looking at the domain name, say here, quoted up microsoftonline.com / blah, blah, blah. If you take an example like support.apple.com is a child domain of apple.com. So domain names are read from right to left instead of left to right. So if you had a domain xyz.com, you could create a child domain called Apple and one under that called support, and the email would read support.apple.xyz.com, which has nothing to do with the apple.com domain. So we used to see this used quite a bit for one reason or another. I don't know. We haven't seen it a lot lately. I don't know if this fell out of favor or whatnot. But again, something, double check that the email that you think you're going to is actually correct. And this one back here is a good example. MicrosoftOnline.com that's not Microsoft, by the way. Very common to see spelling and grammar errors. When a large company sends out a message on behalf of their company, the whole message is reviewed for errors. Quick stab at ourselves. If you do get our e-zine, you know this isn't 100% true because we seem to have some grammatical problem in every one I send out. Obviously my fault. So if a message has poor spelling or grammar, it might be fake because typically it's drummed up by foreign actors. The message requests that you enter personal information. Never do this. No matter how legit the message appears, reputable companies are never sending emails out asking for your account information or passwords or answering security questions unless you've initiated something like a password reset. You would expect immediately to get something back. Yeah, that's probably safe. You can click on it. But if you get something out of the blue that says, hey, we want you to validate X, or we want you to, put your password and username in here so we can make sure that it's right, that companies just don't do that. So don't fall for that. The offer seems too good to be true. If it seems that way, it probably is. Watch out for emails from people you don't know making these hard to believe promises. It's a scam. Unbelievably, that still happens quite a bit. The lost African prince trying to transfer billions of dollars into an account still gets traction to this day, believe it or not. So the last two things, email messages contain a threat. On the other side of making big promises, a lot of scammers will try to scare people into giving up personal information. Those typically take the form of, we're closing your account unless you do something, or the IRS scam. Hey, we're the IRS. We need you to do X, Y, and Z, or we're coming to get you. Or if you're asked to send money via email. No one should ever ask to cover expenses or send money via email. If they do, it's probably a scam. What we have done and encouraged our customers to do is instituting a no blind transfer or a verbal confirmation policies. And I'll get a great example of this type of attack that actually happened to us about a year ago. So, business email compromises or spear phishing. We are seeing more and more and more of this, and it clearly, one of the reasons is because it is working. So, faking, what it is faking an email from a known or trusted sender, like the CEO of a company or a CFO or an HR manager. It is very highly targeted, and in many cases, they visited your website and they know who your people are, who your staff are. They're picking specific names and specific email addresses. This is typically, and there's two pieces to this. One, the targeted piece, where I'm looking at the CEO of a website and I'm sending an email spoofed as him, and the other one is what's called a man in the middle. And that's even a little scarier, and I'll give you an example of that, because what that means is the email has been compromised and they might be watching still. Now, one thing you can do to differentiate these two is you get a spear phishing email, you can, in Outlook, you can look at the header information and look and see what IP the email address came from. If it came from an outside source, it's typically a highly targeted attack. If it came from inside, you got a problem and you need to let your IT people know right away. Better yet, just forward the message to them. They'll handle it for you. So that's the easiest way to do that, is to differentiate that on that header. Yes, and I'll get into SPF records and things like that in just a second that need to be set up around this as well. So here's a great example, and this happened to us back in July, about a year ago. So Melanie, my director of operations, got an email, said, "Hey, Melly, how busy are you? I need you to take care of something," which looked perfectly normal, other than the fact that I didn't have an iPhone. Now, I've blocked out the email addresses here because in looking at this, what they had done is they had our domain, they had a different domain name there. But if you're looking at it on your phone, a lot of times you don't see that. You don't see the full domain. You just see the friendly from name. So Melanie replied back, "Yeah, sure, what's up?" And they replied right back, "I need you to process a payment I forgot to send out yesterday. Should I forward the required details?" Now, at the time, I was sitting in the conference room, right down the hall from her. So, yeah, she came in there and was like, "Well, what's going on with this?" So this was the first time that we'd actually seen this ourselves, but this is something that, preventing those blind transfers and making sure that the people in your companies that are in control of whether or not money can go out and get transferred or write checks, you're checking and confirming with these people. So two quick examples, and I want to kind of go over and let you know kind of how sophisticated some of this stuff is. The man in the middle attack. So I had a prospect who I'd been talking to for quite a while. They're located in Greensboro. They're a manufacturer, and they called us up and said, "Hey, look, we think we got a problem." I said, "Great, what happened?" He says, "We buy tractor trailers from a company down the street, and we've dealt with them for years. And we bought a tractor trailer a couple of months ago, and all this transpired via email. And right at the last minute, we were sent an email that said, 'Hey, the trailer's done, ready to be picked up. And oh, by the way, we've changed our bank. Here's our new transfer number.'" So they transferred the money for this trailer into that bank account, and not knowing that this money's getting evaporated. It was a highly targeted attack, or a man in the middle attack. And it has to be a man in the middle attack, because if you think about it, how would someone outside these companies know that that transaction was transpiring, right? So either the seller or the buyer's email account had been compromised, They were watching this stiff go down, and they struck right at the perfect minute to be able to maximize the percentage of this thing working. So I told you about Vern Harnish, same exact thing. His email got compromised. The hackers were just watching what was going on for months, and they saw that he was looking to buy a piece of property. They waited until he was on stage and couldn't respond, emailed his admin with enough details, because they had been watching this for months, to get a couple $100,000 transferred out into a different account. And I also talked to a prospect here in Raleigh, where they do real estate transactions. Same exact thing. So, if you see these things like this, you need to make sure that you understand how these attacks happen, and don't be misled into thinking it was a one-shot deal, especially if an email has been compromised and they're watching. Yep, showed you this example. Great. All right, prevention tips. So, what do? Do ongoing training and education. Make sure that your people, your staff, not just the people in HR that might send out W-2s or accounting that may send out checks, but all of your people are trained and educated and aware of this. And I will tell you that that's not even perfect. The statistics I read that a properly educated and aware staff can drop click-through rates by 20-25%, but there's still always those people who are going to click because the hackers are continuing to change how they approach this thing. Confirm changes in transactions verbally. This is critical, and it's something. The first time I had this happen actually was my financial advisor, and I was actually trying to transfer money to him. He called me right on the phone. Hey, was this you? So that'll take just a couple of seconds. I think it gives your customers a good sense that you're on top of this type of thing, and that you confirm that this is exactly what needs to happen. Even intercompany transactions. So within our company, if I email our admin to say, hey, cut a check to this or send money here, she has to confirm with me via phone that actually wants to happen. Remember why phishing works. Resist and be suspicious. If an email is pushing you to get something done quickly, a sense of fear or a sense of familiarity, and I know that's super hard, right? Because you're going to be getting an email from your CEO all the time, and it's hard to know, kind of back off and know when that maybe isn't the case there, right? So just make sure that you understand what they're trying to push on, what they're trying to key on, and you're just taking your time with these emails and double checking those tips that I had shown you earlier. Have a layered security approach. So used to be we'd put antivirus on workstations and that was it. We were good to go. Actually, it used to be we had 2 pieces of antivirus cleanup software on a floppy disk, but I digress. So nowadays you need to have a couple of different pieces in place. Number 1, anti-spam with URL defense. I showed you an example of that earlier. So you're scanning the emails for known problems, and you're obfuscating the URLs and back checking the URLs when they get clicked on. Number 2, DNS security. This is where if you click on a link on your PC or even on a mobile device, your system is going out and back checking that destination against known hacked sites. So kind of what URL defense does, but just a different database altogether. Anti-ransomware. So anti-spam, antivirus is great. It's what we have noticed is it's not going to catch it all. There's a new, or I should say, a different kind of segment of software aimed specifically at ransomware. Sometimes it can be a real pain in the rear end to configure. And if there are questions around that, I'll be happy to explain later. But at the end of the day, we rolled this out 2 years ago or so, and have yet to see a ransom issue since that's been rolled out. Next, a heuristic antivirus. So antivirus systems used to be, they would check files against known signatures. And as viruses got more and more prevalent, these files got bigger and bigger and bigger and harder to maintain and changed a lot faster and got less and less effective. The new software that's out there now uses heuristics, so it's actually looking at what programs do on your PC and trying to spot ones that are trying to do malicious things like encrypt files and things like that. DR plan needs to address specifically ransomware, and we've seen this happen before, read about it. We haven't experienced it ourselves, but you've got a DR plan in place where you're doing, instant file replication to a DR site. Well, the minute you start getting your files encrypted at site A, it's getting replicated to site B, and you don't have anywhere to, you can't get that back. So you've got to have some offsite storage. You've got to have some timing in between file changes and when you do copies, and you also have to have the ability to go back in time to get files back. So make sure that you are addressing ransomware in your DR plan. And lastly, a dark web scan. So this is something that we're rolling out now, and what we're looking for is using a couple of different services to look at dark web data for sale on the internet. We're looking for specific domains of ourselves and our customers to see if credentials are out there. So we can look at that stuff, obviously not in real time. Somebody steals a bunch of credentials, they don't post them for sale, we're never going to see that stuff. But at least it gives us another indicator that there might be a problem or there might be an email compromise. And what we often see in this case is you have a user who uses an email address from work to register for something like Domino's Pizza, and they use the same password at Domino's that they do on the corporate network. And once that Domino's gets hacked, and that just happened a couple of months ago, then they can use those same email address and password pairs to go check well-known sites like LinkedIn or Office 365 or whatever. So a lot of times people are getting in that way, and taking a look at the data and figuring out what the next approach is, and it could be a man-in-the-middle attack. So make sure that you're taking a look at all this stuff. Number one, don't assume anti-spam catches everything, because it most definitely does not. Don't whitelist your own domain. One of our best practices is not to do this, but we've seen this in customers that we've brought on, that they whitelist their own domain, so the business email compromise attacks, that appear to be coming from your domain, just sail right in without even getting scanned. And it also opens up to loopbacks. So we continue to see this where it looks like it comes from me to me, right, using the same domain, and it zips right through. And don't think you're too small to be targeted. You may indeed not get on the radar of people who are doing man-in-the-middle attacks, but if a small manufacturer in Greensboro, North Carolina can get hit, then probably you can too. And also remember that the majority of the damage is done by crypto, and that is not directed at anybody. They're spamming every email address they can find, and I guarantee every person that's on this webinar has their emails on those lists and is susceptible to getting those emails, those blind emails. So what do you do if you think you have fallen victim? So a couple of different things. First, disconnect your device, get offline. So if you're plugged in, hardwired, disconnect the cord. If you're wired, wireless rather, turn off the wireless, the NIC in the bottom right-hand corner. Just disable it. That's gonna some malware will look at files on your system and try to find things like social security number, account numbers, things like that, and then package them up and zip them off. It's going to protect you against that. Along with a host of other things, like if you do have ransomware, especially the newer stuff that's out there, it's going to prevent it from spreading on network shares into other PCs that may be attached to the same network that you're on. Use some other device, not your current one that you clicked on the link, but some other device to change all your passwords. Start with email. The reason is because as you're changing other passwords, you're typically going to have to acknowledge that via an email confirmation. So get the email changed first, and then let your friends, family, coworkers know. And I know I'm sure very embarrassing, but it's a lot easier than allowing your coworkers to get tricked into by an email that looks like it came from your account, or worse, did come from your account, because you haven't that you got your email compromised. So if you did give your credentials out, call the company in question. example, Wells Fargo. They are much better equipped to handle that via phone, and all of them have fraud departments nowadays, and they can get that stuff taken care of for you right away. Don't go online and try to change your password, because heaven forbid the hacker's still watching what you're doing, or you know, anything like that. So pick up the phone call. And if you do reuse passwords, everybody does. I know. Change other accounts with those common passwords also. So, and we talked about that a little bit. You know, if you're using the same password for email and LinkedIn, and you fall victim to a LinkedIn password reset link, which I showed you some examples of, hackers are smart enough to try your email and password combos on other sites, right? Like your VPN, and you know, a bunch of different stuff that's out there. Dropbox, you know, who knows? So know that stuff is out there. Alrighty, so I think that's it, at least as far as everything that I had to talk about. I've given a little bit of time for some questions, and again, I apologize. I am running solo, so let me take a look at this over here. And if you do have questions, put them in the chat, put them in the questions, and we'll go through them. The question I get a lot, and this is a good one, is should you remove email addresses from staff listings on the websites? Probably it's not going to make an impact one way or another. And the reason that is because hackers can guess what those email addresses are or should be, right? And they know your domain name because they're looking at your website, and they can put in first initial last name just like ours is, and they can get right in. So don't bother with that. It used to be that we would try to keep emails off of websites, but it's to the point now where it's just so much easier to guess. Question, what about password apps like LastPass? Yes, very, very good. Good stuff. But it's not a panacea, because LastPass was hacked, 6-9 months ago, something like that. So, you know, even them can have they can have these issues. Now, to be fair to them, in reading about it, their password database wasn't hacked. It was just the account database, and the passwords were all still encrypted. So, you know, it wasn't like they, you know, let this stuff get out in the wild. But yes, I feel it's a really good idea to employ those type of tools, especially nowadays, in that so many businesses have all of their employees with multiple authentication methods, all for business use. For example, your employee needs a password to the domain. They need a password to Dropbox. They need a password to LinkedIn. They need a password to all these different places. And when you're decommissioning a user, unless you have rock solid decommission processes and procedures laid out ahead of time, it's easy to forget some of those things. If you have a tool like the corporate or business edition of LastPass, and there are a couple of other ones that are out there, then you have the ability to centrally administer that database. So you have one place you need to change that password, and it won't go out and disable all those other accounts, but it will prevent the user from getting into the LastPass application itself, which effectively blocks them from all those places. Okay, so what about Sender Policy Framework? So there are, unfortunately, email is not authenticated. So I could send a piece of email out that looked like it came from anybody at the world, you know, president of the White House or whatever. And up until recently, there was no way to spot when those emails were coming from somewhere they shouldn't come from. Now, we have a couple of different attempts at trying to rectify that situation. One's called SPF, or Sender Policy Framework, which actually you use your DNS files to confirm what email servers should mail be coming from, which we hoped would fix the problem. The issue is that not a lot of people are implementing the checking, and not a lot of people are implementing the framework itself. So if I, on our mail server, said, okay, use SPF, then everybody that didn't have that in place already, I wouldn't be getting their emails. So it would drop off 80% of the emails that I've got or should be getting that are legitimate emails. There's something also called DKIM, and there's a new piece called DMARC, which is DKIM plus SPF, where they're They're trying to do SSL certs and certificates and back checking and all that other stuff, which I think eventually, maybe in the next couple of years, will address this issue significantly enough to make an impact. But it's almost like HTTP versus HTTPS, right? So there's this big push for everybody to move to HTTPS. In fact, Chrome last year started changing HTTP websites to this big unsecured red box. Even though they weren't any less secure than they were the day before, they're just up in the ante on what the expectation should be. And I think you'll start to see that on the email side as well, especially given the fact how much money is just leaking out of corporations because of this issue. So I don't think it's going to be one person solving this thing. There's not going to be a tool. It's going to be everyone getting on board with DMARC and some of the new technologies that are out there and implementing it. Part of our best practices, yes, we're doing it for all of our customers. We are advertising the SPF, the DKIM, but we can't turn it on for their servers until we see enough uptake in the population. So I hope that makes sense. If you have questions about that, let me know. Next question. How can you make sure that the man in the middle is not still watching if your email was spoofed a couple months ago? Okay, great question. And I probably should have added to this password policies. Okay, so you should be changing those things once a month regardless. If at the time that you knew there was an issue, you should be changing the password. Goes without saying. In the two cases that I explained or gave examples of, they didn't know their email was hacked because the hackers purposely didn't let them know because they were waiting. They were fishing for something big. But in a case like that, if they were changing their passwords every 30, 60, 90 days, they would have been backed out of the system regardless, and they wouldn't have the opportunity to get that done. So that's one way to prevent it. The other one is to look at those headers on those emails to determine whether or not it was coming from your mail system, internal to your mail system, or whether it was being sent outside. So in the example I gave of my director of operations, Melanie, that was coming from the outside because they didn't have any common knowledge of what was going on. They could look at our website and tell that I was the CEO and Melanie was director of ops, and it made sense to send an email between the two of us. In the other examples that I gave around where it was clear that they knew a specific transaction was taking place and they stepped in right at the last minute to grab the money out, that's something where clearly they have hacked an email address and taken advantage of that. So good password policies. That's the answer to that one. All right, any other questions? I don't see any. So if any do come up after the fact, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to kind of give you my input on this stuff and give you whatever help I can to make sure that you're safe and secure and avoiding these phishing attacks. And I hope to see you on our next webinar next month. Thank you.